Okay. Welcome everyone to the Business Agility Institute meetup for August. For those of you who haven't been here before, the Business Agility Institute is a research institute focused on helping organisations respond effectively to an ever-changing world. And if you want to talk more about that, you can talk to that guy over there. We run these meetups monthly, usually on the first Thursday, and we're hoping next month to bring the long-awaited cage fight between our own Martin Chesborough and his arch-nemesis Ross. But tonight we have the wonderful Martin Foster giving us a look into the org design landscape with insights from the Organisation Design Forum's latest Global Practitioner Survey and report, revealing how organisation design is actually being commissioned, practiced and evolved. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today. Here that's Wurundjeri land, and pay respects to elders past and present and any First Nations people joining us today. Just a little note, Tuesday, August 4, just passed, was National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Children's Day. It's a reminder that every generation inherits the systems we design today, whether that's communities, organisations or institutions. The traditional custodians of this country have cared for land, culture and community for over tens of thousands of years. So perhaps one question for us to hold today is, are we designing organisations that will serve only today's goals or future generations as well? And if you want to know more, you can look up the National Voice for Our Children. They're based in Collingwood. So thanks today to Teamform, our event sponsor, for providing a great place to meet and for our refreshments. You can look at Teamform for visualising your delivery teaming structures, whether they be persistent or project-based, and for designing and operating the workforce behind them, given the work, aligning the right roles today and into the future. Before we get into the show, a small bit of housekeeping. So we have our exits here and also at the end of the office. There are also toilets down that way, and of course we have the pizza and the drinks. So with all of that in mind, over to you, Martin.
Let's get started. Thanks, Isabel. And thanks for taking on the intro thing. I felt like
Very little notice.
everything happens with very little notice. Right, so tonight we are going to talk about org design. And then you might be asking yourself a few questions like, why is a business agility meetup talking about that? So a little bit more. Framing will be, what exactly is organizational design? And there's been other meetups in the past 12 months that have invited other individuals to talk about org design. So we're going to cover a little bit, not superficially, but really take a tranche as to what's changing in that market. And to do that, I'm going to leverage practitioner insights from the Org Design Forum, or ODF. It's a predominantly American-focused group of people, although there are a lot of Europeans involved and not enough Australians and New Zealanders. There's really an opportunity there to grow into it. But yeah, they're a fantastic bunch that put on a conference where if you find yourself on the other side of the planet, you might just find Megs in the same room. So a few practitioners around here, it's weird to find, where do you find these communities? But yeah, they published, as an organization that's out there to serve practitioners of the craft, similar to what we're doing here with Business Agility. I think there's a very high overlap. They really wanted to understand, where is the trade going, what's going on the ground. So you do the most logical thing about that is you chuck out a survey and you wait for people to give you a bit of a steer. So we'll be covering mostly that, and then if we have the time, because I haven't really seen how much this is going to lead us into, I'd love to have a little exercise to practice things. So I'm going to attempt to stick ourselves to keep enough time to run that through. Which leads to a little bit of why is Martin talking to you about org design? We do, in terms of a person or a career, I started off as an engineer, I got into product management, and then started looking into how teams come together to deliver work. That's why Teamform as a company was sort of put in. I work for Teamform, I don't own it, but really looking at that structure of how do you bring people together in teams, and then for a larger scale, teams of teams and teams of teams of teams to deliver on some form of outcome. We started off with digitization. It was and it's grown beyond that. I think what I found is the problems of teams, you might have all of a company, half a company, a quarter of a company, 10% of a company in like cross-functional teams, but the entire company, entire organization has to work and get things done. So that's when you realize you've actually been talking about this thing called org design your like past 10 years of your career, and now you've got a word for it. So that's why I'm talking to you about organizational design, is that realization there's an arc. The other reason I'm talking to you about it is I have done some work with Evan, the Business Agility Institute, on the Business Agility report. A lot of that had been like looking at qualitative long-form answers to the survey that's put out. And when I saw the Org Design Forum put their survey out, I wrote to them saying, so how are you going to handle these long-form questions? And they wrote back saying, we don't know. And that's when I put my hand up saying, maybe we should have a look. So I got involved in the actual survey processing, which is part of the fun of further involvement. When you find this itch and you scratch it, like you tend to find more and more underneath it. Next thing you know, you're talking about org design at a business agility meetup. Right, so why organizational design? Did we bother about like defining it? Super high level, like a lot of people equate organizational design with like who's in the org chart and how does that play together. But it's much more than that. It's a practice that asks a few more things. Hopefully, starting from like some form of strategic priority. What is it that you say you want to do? Then it will follow on and say, do you have the right people with the right capabilities, roles, skills, like defined roughly like that, and like with a good way of working together so that they can actually be focused on delivering on those priorities. So everything I just said there is like a judgment call. Like you're saying, well, I want this thing, and I've only got 40 hours and so much money and so much budget or whatever, so I need to make some trade-offs and like prioritize the thing that I said was important. Or maybe I'll make some different implicit trade-offs and not tell you about it, and you'll find yourself working on something else. That's actually the organization making a decision to work on something they said is not a priority because that's where the flow has come. So really, organizational design is about like being able to identify these, and yeah, a bit of an overlap with the business agility world. So it's quite far-reaching. Like, org design will shape how work flows, who owns the outcomes, like ownership and accountability is super important. Where decisions sit, so ideally decisions sit with more people than just the CEO or big boss. People feel empowered, they know where they can make the decisions. You'll be able to work on like how teams and roles interconnect. So in other words, if you've got something that you said is high priority, then hopefully those individuals will have low friction, low handoffs in working with each other, which probably also means the things that you said aren't high priority are going to have to go through a few extra hoops. And around that, you're also going to wrap out what gets measured and learned, but also rewarded. So if there's incentives, it's got to come back in there a little bit too to incentivize the right thing. Incentives don't always have to be money, by the way, but it does all sort of comes together. So yeah, if this is a business agility meetup, like how does this connect? Oh, there is a diagram that I thought I was about to show there, and good job, Martin. Classic. Anyways, I'm sure it will just pop up in one of these follow-on slides. But what I wanted to say, and maybe when the diagram actually does pop up, is 2 months back we had Evan talking about the domains of business agility. If you missed that, we actually have a write-up. Like if you just follow the links from like LinkedIn or Meetup itself, it will take you to what we covered there. But the domains of business agility are a model for how you think through the way organizations work, how they're organized, how they're incentivized, very, very similar topics to what we've just been talking about. And there's a brand new map that's been outlaid. And I was supposed to show the map to make the connection. So now I'm talking about the joke that you can't see. It'll probably pop up 5 slides later. Right. So we talked a little bit about what organizational design is, what we're talking about here. So this gets us to like the change. And this is informed from this practitioner survey. Something is happening for real that I think practitioners, and this is across the agility domain, have been hoping would be happening for a while, but now there's actual evidence of it, is work actually does change continuously, right? Like if you're in a tech world, it seems like the pace is quite fast, but I think if you take a step back and look across industries, Like there's geopolitical upheaval, like the past 12 months have been fantastic for that. There's just like a lot of different vectors for change that are hitting companies, organizations, whichever way they work. And what has not been happening is like the response to that has been infrequent. So a lot of what we're going to be looking to like anchor ourselves to is how can we build this muscle to adapt when we need to, as opposed to like some schedule. So what does this look like in practice? Like what I'm talking about is like classic annual planning for businesses or organizations where you get together once a year and go like, what has changed? It's an important introspection part, but I think what we're pushing to do here is how do you build the muscle at all levels of the organization to say, hey, there's a significant enough change here. We could wait 9 months until the next planning period, or we could think about how we identify things that are important enough and react to them now in a more continuous manner. So does that remind you, so the current state, if you're waiting like year by year, step by step, that might remind you of something that we've seen in other parts in terms of ways of working, waterfall like one part at a time, and really how do we bring this more continuous muscle in? So connecting back to the agility theme a little bit, like teams themselves, right? Like everything you do, you can't like individuals on their own or teams on their own. I think this is what we've seen across the business agility and the org design forum research, is a team in a much larger system can't like change massive amounts on their own. That's why like there needs to be a bit of help, ways, mechanisms for teams to be able to call up and say, hey, I'm stuck on something. And then a muscle inside the organization to be able to look down and say, hey, we realize here things aren't quite right. In other words, like how can teams or how can people pick up the priorities are being changed without trade-offs? Like what does that look like? Everything's important. No, it's not. People are going to like pick up on the priority that they care about or that people reward them or yell at them more or less for. Decisions are held far from the work. So if the teams need to decide on something, but they don't have the right rights for it, it's like, oh, hold on, we need to escalate this up 2 or 3 levels. So the next meeting with the boss is tomorrow, and the next meeting with the architecture board is next Friday, and the next meeting of like the steerco is next month. Then you've got yourself like at least a 1-month arc before a decision can be made to come back and straighten things out. So we really want to be able to move decisions closer. Funding, always a big one. It rewards projects over outcomes. Like the funding mechanisms come in as key to be able to unlock some of those changes. And then, of course, like handoffs, right? So if you've got a lot of work that's traversing functional boundaries or boundaries that are not meant to have work traverse them, it's going to be more friction. You might be waiting for specific times. You might be waiting for queues, gates. Please lodge a ServiceNow ticket and we'll get back to you in 2027. These are all parts of the design. And then, of course, last but not least, what does it mean for us inside the room? Like the roles, might not be built, or the roles that are being asked for might not be suited for the work that's actually heading towards us right now. And there it is. I knew I put it in. So, ordering. So to me, a lot of this sounds like the models, the domains of business agility from Business Agility Institute, very much looking at like how you look at your customers, how you handle your leadership, how you think about value and delivery, how you get that high performance culture, and then how like the day-to-day operations of the company adapt. There is so much more to unpack underneath this. I would point you to Evan's presentation from 2 months back / the Business Agility Institute website to learn more. So we know there are challenges. We know there's this sort of intent to like react a little bit more frequently than like yearly or quarterly maybe. How do we get improvement mechanisms in, and like where have practitioners seen like success, benefits, where are the challenges, what do we hear from the ground? So this is where we can come into the space of the org design forums, global practitioner survey. So here, 200 organizations surveyed globally. The responses very, very much match up like the distribution of where people that are active with the org design forum like live. So heavy United States, Canada, Europe, and then those peppering across the rest of the world. But what's really nice about it, it's a very broad range of industries. So on this graph that's microscopic, it's leaning out like all the different industries that responded to the survey. The orange bar is technology, but what I'm trying to show you here is that the volume of all the other industries far exceeds technology. So where sometimes we get a little bit of a focus of like, hey, we're dealing with software development. No, like everything we're talking about today is cross-cutting across, I'm pretty happy to say, like all types of work. And it very, 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 very much picked up like high level across all the like responses. People are talking about, this, maybe it sounds cliche, but like the pace of change, like just being extremely, extremely high. So it connects our story. So the next little bit, I'm going to unpack the high level learnings because I think it's part of the pitch for today. Like what are the drivers for change? So, because like if you feel this malaise, you still have to get like some sort of buy-in to have a change. So it's either like you're inside a team, you complain to your like leader, team lead, whatever, and they like, yeah, I get it, until you get to some point that's high enough that can actually affect change, or can affect change within their own scope. So, what was surprising in terms of drivers? So like the survey data does come from September, October last year, but like some anecdotal other like mini spot checks are showing that it's still holding for now. We were surprised to hear that like leadership change, which affects a lot of organizational design, legislation, and then particularly AI. Like we expected, like everyone's talking about AI, like that must be like causing heck on the ground. No, that's not what's going on. It's really the two big drivers are operational efficiency. So like how an organization works and delivers, particularly if it's not like build, but it's like you've got this factory, this product, this thing, and just need to keep that crank going so that you can deliver a product you currently have on the market and keep on doing that well, or maybe do it for a little bit of higher quality, a little bit lower price. Those operational improvements are the biggest driver. And right next to that, it's like a shift in strategy. So, the leadership of the company. Good day, welcome to the meetup. All good. You get so the two big drivers, operational shift, and then operational change, operational improvements, and shifts in strategy. And a lot of that is reacting to something else. So what we saw is while those two big callouts were in most responses, you then had it coupled with something else. So there's a lot of bundling, like we want operational improvements because there's cost pressures. There's a shift in strategy, maybe because AI, and there's a whole like laundry list, a shift in strategy because of a new leader, because there's like different geopolitical or like geographic changes that we need to work around. So it was neat to see those two major threads, like strategy or operational improvement. They can work very well together, but then it's that and, something else that was driving with it that I guess just wasn't expected.
Quick question.
Yes.
Is there a chance that that's just because strategy and operational efficiency are stated reasons, even if they're not?
Like it were stated in.
Like they're the safest thing to call a redesign of an org and the defaults?
So they sound safe, but walking into this, I think we thought we'd see a lot more on leadership change and cost constraints. And that was just talking to the people involved in the survey.
Yeah,
so
like if you were a new leader,
yeah,
you wouldn't say, we're doing a redesign because I'm here. You'd say, we're doing a redesign because...
this is a good point. Yeah. So like that's just not something that comes up in the data, right? Like we can make we can make guesses as to why it was coming through, but really what was trying to be sussed out is like what are people saying on the ground as the driver for change. And what this helps us with is like if you realize something is shitty around you, like what are the things, what are the conversations, and how can you frame them for having the best odds at affecting some form of change, right? So picking from those.
Bundling is interesting as well at the bottom there.
Yeah, the and, right? Like new leader has got like strategic shift because of a new leader or as a result of one.
I think maybe the AI things could be wrapped in all of those.
We will talk more about AI. How could you not? Something else. So I'm just going to cover a few major highlights. This like report got itself to like almost 100 pages in length. So I am very much cherry picking. Other areas that come in a lot is like what are the methods and tools that practitioners use to help affect change? So you realize something isn't going quite right. What are people doing to help that along? And this is because in the org design world, there are a couple of like classic frameworks that have become people's go-tos, and we were completely not surprised to see these listed. So like there's this model, Galbraith star model. If you work for Accenture, they've put 6-bit in the middle, but like it's a very foundational model. Like 1 out of 10 people like mentioned this. And it got bundled and led to a lot of like other side responses. There's other thought leaders in the space. Amy Cates, Greg Kessler, they've got themselves a milestones model. It's all actually pretty neat to consume things. I'm not going to dwell too much on them right now, but they do very much look into how strategy, structure, people, processes, and reward comes together. But it's like if you sort of want to sample, just like the Business Agility Institute's model covers for a lot of what we talk about here in Business Agility. It's just neat to see what are those foundational pieces. These all started up in about the 70s, 80s, 90s in terms of like where they become. And they've persisted, which is a really like great thing. But I guess some of the challenge that's also identified by my co-report writers is, are people adapting fast enough? Are these still the right models, or are we just sort of stuck in the one thing that we learned? We got really, really adaptive at one point in time, and now we've got something else that's, or new market conditions or new operating conditions that maybe don't give you quite enough. So I guess what are the implications about this? Like there's still a lot for whatever it is that you do, right? Like if you're not in org design, that's cool. It really brought out some implications about strengthening the core, like to be able to strengthen that core craft. That core thing that you do is still important, but you still have to then be able to react, right? So how do you accelerate with different practices that come around? And yeah, sure enough, like data-aware, AI-aware methods coming through. So that started to really, it came in lower down in the map of what people were using. Technology did not come in even close to as much as I thought it was. So as a population of practitioners, like 90% of the responses here were methods and practices and not really focused on technology and tools. So sometimes that's refreshing and good because one of these things like can persist beyond a tool. Other times it can be challenging about the adaptation. Challenges. So I enjoyed seeing, this question was like, hey, what sort of challenges do you get as a practitioner? Like if you're affecting change, what gets in your way? The designing part, I guess, really came in as like being relatively easy, but making things real is hard. So what do we mean by that? Number one challenge, if you're brought in to affect or help affect a change, it still seems to be the stakeholder comms, right? So like working with your boss, that could be challenging. Working with the people that are trying to lead, that are sponsoring the change. Getting them to buy in to see the reasons why, and then to actually get to implementation being the second challenge. So a lot of feedback coming in from the market or the practitioners saying, we do all these designs to react to a condition that seems to be reasonably on fire, and like there's a high reason to act, but then they get shelved. And this can be maybe a good signal, like maybe like people aren't just like stirring the pot because they could, but also it could be a signal that opportunities for improvement aren't being latched onto. So we thought that was pretty interesting. And then to sort of connect back to the data part, there was quite a few challenges on just getting tools and assistance and the data. So people say, like, I want this, but it's actually hard for the people on the ground to get access to like a current org chart or like a current view of the work. So yeah, it's just neat to see struggles that I might find personally in practice are actually finding themselves like at a global level. It's like, are we special? Are we doing it wrong? Yeah, these are hard everywhere. And next, that's the same slide twice. And then the last thing I'm really going to talk through that's specific about the report is the measurement of impact. So other professional practice organizations that sometimes hang around with are the like project managers, portfolio program managers. A lot of people talk about measuring impact in their work. What was really neat about this cohort of org design practitioners, and I actually heard this on the ground when we did make it to conference a year and a half ago, was this focus on setting up like mechanisms to say, hey, if we're going to baseline and we're look at the organization today and we're going to propose a change, like, does that change actually net a benefit? A lot of practices out there don't look afterwards to see if the goals were actually met, like did work, were we able to prioritize the things that we said were important? What was amazing across this cohort was a very, very, very strong amount of feedback that, They're very aware that you have to set these measures in place. You have to set the goals that you're trying to achieve, and then follow up to see if it worked. I think it's potentially just about being involved in the next piece of business to be able to talk about the benefit you brought in the last one. But that really struck me because it's not something we'd seen across many other practices out there. And then, sure enough, are we going to talk about AI? Yes, we are. So the not surprise is, of course, AI tooling is being used across org design work. But where it really comes into is it sounds like an individual, working with a chatbot, having a conversation kind of thing, but it's like a one-to-one individual doing work kind of thing. It's not really a team piece of work. And it tends to be on the, I'm not going to call it low value, but the low-hanging fruit pieces of work, if you will. So the higher up you go up the value chain, like actually doing some modeling one individual, there's not much of that going on at the individual level. Now, this, I guess, I completely expected to see. What I really wanted to hear about, though, is are people taking a look at how the technology is changing the way work gets done? So this goes beyond the individual. How do you do inside a team, inside an entire business unit? Are people thinking about how that's changing? Because there's loads and loads of talk about it, on the social networks. My LinkedIn feed is full of how AI affects your work. But every time I look into it, I rarely see a superficial, anything more than just superficial adaptation coming on. So the answer is no. AI is rarely factored into op model designs. Now, this could be because, again, the survey did run 12 months ago, 10 months ago. But there's most people are not thinking about it. That's what this part is. Or they're running experiments, or, some minor tweaks and augmentation. But out of all the respondents, basically a handful, came by and said, yeah, we're reimagining the entire way that work gets done, in maybe not for today, but seeing the changes that are coming and what that might mean for compositions of teams, incentives, how work flows around, even the different tasks that people do. So this wasn't massively surprising, but I was, as in that it was low, I was just surprised to see it that low. And if I can think of a parallel, and this parallel has been talked to a lot, but I really like the idea, it's when new technologies come in, there is quite an adaptation to the way, just because you have a new technology doesn't mean you immediately get the benefits from it. So the way it's used, the workflows around it, all really matter to get the benefit out of it. And this has been happening with every single technological change, right? Just because you have a wheel doesn't immediately make you faster. You have to build roads to make it easy to get from point A to point B. An example that's commonly massively used with this is early industrialization. The first factories were steam powered. This is one central plant and lots of gears and shafts driving the power around. So most of the work and the organization happened around the delivery of the power, not where it made sense in terms of workflow. It's just it's where it made sense because there's the only way we can make the thing turn to process the cotton or to punch holes and join things together. But after electrification came in, these factories switched, but they didn't alter their investment all the way. They just replaced the power distribution with electric motors, but they kept the layout as is. So they got the benefits of more reliable operation, but they didn't think of the way work moved around because the equipment was still there and was still laid out, and there was no aha moment. And it took almost 30 years until basically that last batch of factories ran through its capitalizable service life for people to get to designing new ones and thinking, wait. Just because we've been doing this before with steam, now we've got electricity, we should be able to think about how we lay out the factory, how we think of the work, how we sequence the work so that it makes the most sense. And that's just, you can follow this arc all the way through to Toyota and their fanatical insights as to how you can sequence factories, and many others have done this since. To make sure that you've got the minimal amount of handoffs, you're keeping the least amount of inventory, all about getting the highest quality product, the lowest amount of time at the lowest cost. But back to AI, that's the parallel that I really like to go back and think about, is when these new technologies come in, it takes a while to adapt and to think about how the change could happen, hence the low percentage beforehand. So those are the main highlights, I think, that I wanted to cover from the broader ODF report, because I think they're the biggies that we can respond to in this room. But also realizing, like this thing was published in March, and like the world might have changed a little bit since then. So I went hunting around to like who else has published some research since, and well, we can cut on a little bit of that. So it says this is supposed to be like May. MIT Sloan published a bit of research, so a few months ago, looking at the question of like how do you move, or how does different elements of work change, right? And really unpacking things from tasks to workflows. So what do we mean by this? A lot of organizational design work, and when you're looking at how something gets done from A to B, the standard practice might be to look at what are the roles that are involved, what are the tasks that they need to do, decompose those tasks, and think, right, I need people around that can handle all these tasks. And the call to action they've taken here is really like lift that up one more level, think of the workflow you need to get done, because that allows you to switch things around a little bit. What is AI good at? Certain narrow tasks have higher success rates or like better economic value. Route the new technology, whatever it is, like I'm saying AI here, but it could be anything, to those tasks, but keep the eye on the end-to-end workflow as to how work gets done. So it was neat to see this being validated inside research. And then they're prompting people around to that means you might have to change roles or change parts, to take into account like the shifting nature of some of the tasks in getting something done from end to end. Other bits of research, and this comes across like Deloitte, a bit of the Sloan work, but what I really, really like about it is the bottleneck to improvement is yet again organizational. So it's a lot of what this community talks about, it's a lot of what the org designer community talks about. If you're adapting to a new technology, there's a leading edge of people. I think actually even the sooner safer half-year graphs are good at that. They got people jumping the chasm. There's some people at the front that will adopt a new technology, that will go all in, that really pick it up, but that's a small subset of the population. How do you bring the benefit across to more? Becomes a lot harder, and that is an organizational problem, right? So like our leaders putting the right incentives in place to give people time to adapt to change and get familiar with it. And really, are we taking like these technological advances, these capability advances, whatever they are, and then shifting their focus from like how does an individual do work better to how the entire team works better? Because that's a lot harder. That you got to bring in like communications, like how do we coordinate people? How do we coordinate people if we're making smaller teams that are more focused because you can use technology? This is all elements that I think aren't getting as much look into, and that's where a lot of opportunity is how do I share the benefits in a coherent way so we're not like a large group of people all operating independently and then redoing the same work 10 times because we don't even realize that's what's going on. Organizational, again, culture, management, talent practices, all really, really, really core parts to making technology work well. So I'm not saying it's all about the people, stupid, like it's about the people and the technology brought together. It's not either or. So to get ourselves to an exercise, thinking a little bit about what we can do. So I want to frame a few things, and then we're going to break off into groups and try some of this out. So a little bit more. Any questions so far, by the way? This is a really good inflection point to stop this silence. Max?
With the AI, how did they ensure that it was not hallucinating? So say you have agentic AI, you're depending on an agent to give you some answers to certain business questions. How do they ensure that? Do they have testing or what is it?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer that as that's not an area of this research, right? So the broad area organization, tools have failure inflection modes, and that's a failure mode that you need to be aware of if you're going to use AI. Just like if you're going to use a knife and you have to have it really, really sharp because you're a chef, you can slice yourself with it just as well, right? So there's a bit of understanding how the tool works and where it fails. So I'm trying to answer that question from a macro point. That's not what was observed here, and that's not the question that was asked. It was more as something comes in and it becomes available, how well is that knowledge, how well is that new technology being disseminated, which includes knowledge about when not to use the thing. Right?
Okay.
So if you need to, like-
that the agent was working good.
I don't think that. No, I don't think that assumption's there.
Oh,
Yeah, it hasn't. It just hasn't asked that question.
oh, okay.
Yeah. It's saying, like, if we're going to adapt to new technologies, whatever they are, then what is our mechanism organizationally to disseminate the knowledge about where this can be used well and how we adapt to it, in part to be able to better compete. Because something else, maybe that's unsaid, to flip that around, is if there's a technological capability out there that allows if your competition picks it up and they can get way, way, way more efficient, that's going to be a challenge for your profitability and long-term survival, because they'll be able to deliver a better product at a lower price than you can, so hence time to adapt. But yeah, learning how to leverage the technology right is all part of that. And for AI, it's how do I manage hallucinations? Or how do I manage hallucinations would be part of that. Yeah, so framing ourselves up for a bit of an exercise. How might we think about this to wrap this all back together from a org design, business agility lens? Very much the focus on starting for the outcome. Or another way of studying this is like start from like, what is the strategic idea that you've got, and then redesign the work to come back and line against it. This holds regardless if you're looking at technology. It is very much, or not, it's like, how can I improve the organization? Similar steps. So if you think of the outcome, like what sort of value do you want to get from this? What do you want to get done? And then looking at how that value gets delivered in flows, which we have seen this recently in this meetup. And then moving decision rights to the right people. So if you're close to where the work is and someone needs to make a decision, what does that process look like? Talked a bit about that at the start. And then what are the right roles? What sort of like capabilities do you want to have close to it? Is it a person? Is it a team that should own this thing? Is there a place there for the technology part? And then like, how do I learn when things go wrong, right or wrong, and promulgate that? So technology is just another variable in this picture. It's very much an organizational problem. So how might we apply this? Back in March, we had Daryl Wright talk to us about value streams. And I thought a lot of what he was doing is very, very, very aligned to some of the challenges we're looking at in terms of organizational design and ultimately these workflows that we want to optimize around it. So I am going to encourage you to pick a workflow that currently sucks in your life. I use fancy word workflow, but it could really be anything, right? Like, is the ability when your fridge is empty to get that refilled not a pleasant experience? Are there better ways? You could take this through to a problem at work, right? Like, my customers are upset. Maybe I should find out why. So I think we're going to try breaking up into 2 or 3 small groups to give this a crack. But I really want you to pick one workflow that gets stuck, map it out. You'll notice there's lots of whiteboards around here, so cluster around one of those, erase it if there's something on it, and just really, really map it out. Like, what is it you're trying to accomplish? What goes on in getting that done? So it's good to think about where are you waiting, where are you handing off, who do you need someone else? Like, do you have to do the same thing again? I'll leave this up, and then like, based on what you're looking at right now, like what should you change? So you're taking this little break to think about this workflow. This is actually the opportunity that you have to think about what should stop, change, move, or combine. When I put my consultancy hat on, I get the privilege to walk into organizations that have challenges. And I think half of the magic is I'm given the time, and the team is given the time at that point to stop and slow down and actually look at the system and like, oh yeah, this has always sucked, but we've had more work to do, so we haven't been able to stop at that point to improve it. The ability to stop and give it, look at process improvement is super valuable. And then if you've got any decisions that are unclear, but basically like, how do you understand if you're going to make a change, what's the feedback you're looking for to see that it's gotten better? Does this make sense? So we're going to apply it. I'm not going to take a look at people, we're going to look at the process and workflow, because as you look at that lens, how the organization comes together is a great little exercise. And with that, thank you very much for participating and taking this exercise from my mental model of like, 5-10 minutes will be fine. It's been 45. Really appreciate it. Again, leave you one thing, if work changes continuously, then really the big pressure from this is op models, org design. That's got to become a continuous activity to keep connecting so that the companies can adapt to whatever the future brings, which might be a line I've stolen from other people. But I think it's a good one, so I'm going to repeat that. So again, thanks for your time this evening. Thanks for bearing it out. Really happy to see the turnout. If you want to see the report, have a read through. It's at the Org Design Forum. See you, Nosh. There is a little research tab up there with exactly one piece of research on it, so it's not that hard to find out. With that, we'll be around. That's it for today. We'll be around for the next 30, 45 minutes, whatever it takes. Having a chat until at least all the food is gone.